Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is sponsored by Christopher Bangs from the author interview podcast, Stand Up, Fight Back. Their latest episode, they interviewed author Hillary Klein from
Compañeras.
They talk about the rad Zapatista woman who smashed patriarchy and fought the state. I just barely finished listening to this podcast. I loved it. It's a great conversation. I love some of the back ones. I've gotten through about half of the back catalog so far. I highly, highly recommend listening to this one.
If you'd like to sponsor an episode, all that we ask from you is to donate at least $10, because that's about how much it costs us to produce each episode. So go to whichsidepodcast.com, click on the donate tab, and sponsor.
And we'll do whatever you pretty much say. I love it. We're pretty cheap.
We'll dance around like puppets, be your shill.
Whichsidepodcast.com. This is episode 121.
Yeah, we had Jenny Brown on from Woodstock Animal Sanctuary.
She also wrote the book, The Lucky Ones, with one of our previous guests, Gretchen Primrick. I love this conversation. She runs an amazing animal sanctuary. I'm going to go visit it. And hopefully they have a new announcement that she kind of put on the show that, you know, if you listen to it, you'll get it before most people. So listen to that and hear their new announcement. What news and events do we have going on this week?
Well, in Germany, there was a butyric acid attack at Peek and Kloppenburg. And in France, the offices of a hunting organization were ransacked.
Butyric acid, is that the acid that melts away the fur off fur coats?
I'm not sure. I think it's that stinky one that, like, Sea Shepherd throws.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got you. I'm thinking muriatic acid. I think that's what I'm thinking of for taking the fur off. Anyways, that's awesome. I love me my actions. For the slingshot this week, February 25th, 1908. The good old Washington Post proposed that I want to underline that, capitalize it, all anarchists should be killed en masse. If you do like these fun little tidbits of history, you can pull these out. I pull these out of the Slingshot Personal Organizer. You can get your own personal organizer at an info shop. So go to your local info shop, pick one up. If you don't have one, go to AK Press and get one there.
They don't sponsor us to do this. We just love them.
It's true. I sincerely hope you enjoy this episode.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side? Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
So how was your day, Ben? How's it been going up there?
Well, I was just out on the sanctuary when my very kind husband reminded me that I had this podcast. It's a snowy tundra outside right now. We've still got about 2 feet of snow on the ground, and which means the animals spend a lot of time in their barns, which means they're crapping and peeing a lot in their barns, which means lots of cleaning, which means volunteers. But still, we have a medical treatment room that's always buzzing with special needs animals or animals who are, basically like hospice care. And so especially in the wintertime, there's tons of activity going on down there. So, new volunteers, old volunteers who are here and checking in, people that, in all kinds of weather, just amazingly will come out and shovel poo and spend time with the animals. It's a sanctuary for them too, in a lot of ways. Those people who feel the way we feel about the human, non-human animal relationship, and this whole thing is a social justice movement. So, it really is. It's sanctuaries are sanctuary for people too.
I've never been to a sanctuary. I kind of have a hate relationship with animals.
I've met vegans like you.
Like, I hate to kill them. I hate to subject them to anything, but I hate to be around them.
Yeah, I have. You are a phenomenon. It totally blows my mind, but I have met others like you who really see it, that you want justice. You know they shouldn't be mistreated, but yet you have no desire to spoon with a pig and cuddle.
You know, I have spooned with a pig before. And like, what's really interesting is when I meet an animal, like one-offs, I can form a relationship, but I'm okay with individual animals, right? But as a whole, I'm kind of like, yeah, do your thing. I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, and then there's people like me who just want to like pinch their cheeks and kiss them on the nose and scratch their fur and bury my face in their fur. And, you know, and for a lot of us, I mean, I'm one of those people that I've always, you know, I prefer hanging out with animals more than I prefer hanging out with people. That's terrible to say, but oh, so true. They don't judge you. They don't talk back. They treat you with, they respond to kindness, and they're thrilled to have your attention and your compassion, you know, and it really shows. So, and also just, you know, it feels really good. It's like all these guys came from abuse, neglect, abandonment. They've escaped from slaughterhouses. They're victims of the food industry. So this is their, you know, this is their happy ending. Not that it's an ending anytime soon, but that's, you know, even though we do hard-hitting educational tours and we see terrible things with these rescues, you know, at the end of the day, just knowing that we're there happily ever after is really what it's all about. And, you know, I've been an animal activist since I was 18. And when I decided that I wanted my activism to lead to starting a sanctuary, you know, there was the desire to be with the animals hugely, but also because I had visited another sanctuary and had seen and felt the impact that it had on me. I really see sanctuaries as an incredibly powerful activism tool because, you know, it's here, the animals, the victims, are tangible beings. They're individuals. They have names. They're not numbers. They come to their names. They have different personalities. You look at them in the eyes, and you're in an environment, which is unusual for a lot of people, in an environment where the animals are friends and not food, and the people who care for them and the environment you're in is one of veganism. And so, you know, just exposing people to that. You see little lights go off a lot of times because they've, you know, you can get just, it's overwhelming to think about the 10 billion land animals who are killed every year in this country for human consumption. But when you are hearing about it, or you're hearing about how pigs live and die on large industrial farms and small farms alike, when you're hearing that while you're meeting a pig, you know, while you're meeting them and you get to rub their belly and they're acting funny and they're oinking at us to come over and give them attention, that's when, for a lot of people, the synapses really start to fire and they make the connection that, oh, wow, they've got just as much personality. They're just as engaging as, you know, cats and dogs. So sanctuaries, you know, having my own sanctuary was a way to not have to work for somebody else at their sanctuary, but also it's kind of a magical thing. It's because they're never around these animals. You know, we're raised with the whole old MacDonald had a farm, the sort of, you know, image of bucolic pastured animals and babies nursing from their mothers and pigs splashing in the puddles and chickens pecking at the ground. And, you know, we have these sort of fairy tale ideas of what farms look like, but it couldn't be further from the truth. And people never have the opportunity to engage with these animals in an environment of compassion and where they're friends and not food, other than at sanctuaries. And it's a pretty fabulous thing.
Well, unlike Jeremy, I actually like animals, and so we volunteer at sanctuaries pretty frequently.
Oh, cool.
But there's nothing like giving a pig a belly rub, and it's, there's so much like dogs. It's just so great, and people don't really realize that. But I was going to ask you, like, what's a story about an animal there that has just really touched you, like something super special?
Well, we have a young cow right now, and her name is Fawn, and she came here last summer. When I heard about her, I mean, the story was so sad. This woman, this kind-hearted woman, had asked this farmer if he ever had it. She would love to bottle raise a calf if he was ever willing to give her one. And a year or two later, this farmer, remembering that, had this little female calf at a dairy farm, an organic dairy farm, who fell to the ground when she was born because her mother was all chained and tethered, and she hit her face and she hit her knee. The farmer called this woman who wanted to bottle raise a calf and said, "Well, I've got one for you. I don't know if she's going to make it, but you can have her." And she excitedly went over and picked up little Fawn, and took her back home, and really, they built a pen for her inside the kitchen. She had a vet take a look at the knee, and she was on antibiotics and all these other things. Anyway, the vet misdiagnosed the problem with her knee and that it was fractured, which caused a horrible infection, which erupted in pus and degraded a lot of her kneecap. And so this very sweet woman, she wanted to do what was right for Fawn. And she basically just thought, well, she's going to end up being, maybe her life will be shortened, but I've had the vet out. I've done all that I could. She kept it wrapped and hoped for the best. And so as Fawn grew, this leg, she limped on this leg horribly, couldn't use it very well. And when she grew to the size that she couldn't support her weight anymore on 3 legs, she started knee crawling. So, she had her front knees on the ground. That was the only way she could propel herself forward. And so she had the vet out again and said, "I don't know what to do." And the vet said, "Look, by the time fall comes around, you're probably going to have her euthanized." She even had a neighbor who had said, "Yeah, when the time's right, you can come over. I'll get my gun and put her out of her misery." So this woman was trying to figure out what to do, and there was a major tragedy in her family, and we got the call that this was going to happen to this young cow, that she was going to have to be shot if we couldn't take her. And when I saw pictures of her and video, I'd sent one of our staff down there to get some video. I just thought it felt like somebody just cut my heart out and stomped on it, seeing this poor young cow. She was about 16 months old, knee walking, and her other front leg had become totally crippled because she had been using it to support her weight in her other leg. Anyway, sorry, long story short, we took her to Cornell Veterinary Hospital up in Ithaca, New York. It's one of the best Cornell veterinary hospitals in the country. It's like a teaching veterinary hospital. And surprisingly, they said that they thought that they could help her, that they had done, they see all sorts of fancy race horses and have a big equine division, and they were willing to give it a go. She had this surgery. They straightened out both of her legs. They had to basically fuse one of her legs to where it's completely stiff. And basically, she just got... So the legs were straightened. She's been getting physical therapy. But then we met up with a guy who's like a specialist at making braces, again, for horses, because people care about horses and they don't care nearly as much for cows. But she just got both of her braces. She is a totally different animal in these braces. She stands up. You can just see it makes her back feel better. She can stand completely straight up for the first time in her life. And she's like one of the sweetest cows you have ever met. Over the top, totally over the moon sweet. And just seeing her, I can't even describe it, the joy. And she stands up and she starts kind of frolicking around and kind of headbutting. And you can just tell it feels so good for her for the first time to be able to stand up straight and have the support that her legs need, because she had muscle atrophy in her shoulders and all kinds of problems. Anyway, in terms of overcoming a really bad physical disability because of, I hate to say it, and it was unintentional, but it was neglect. If this woman would have had the wherewithal to have taken her to a good veterinary hospital and not just had a local vet who really didn't know anything about what was happening with her knee, and also probably saw her as livestock. Like, you're really going to invest this much in a cow, ma'am? We hear this a lot. But watching her now, she's just amazing. And this is all, you can look at her story on our website, which, by the way, is woodstocksanctuary.org. We've got a little rotating window on the front page, and you can click on the picture. It's me hugging and kissing Fawn. She's a sweet brownish colored Jersey cow, and you can read the whole story and watch the video. I guarantee, there's a very good chance you're going to bawl your eyes out. There's a good chance.
I don't know how vets can have that disconnect with, like, seeing some animals, or I mean people in general, I guess, seeing some animals as animals and other animals as livestock. But for vets, it just seems a little bit like they should know better.
Well, it's surprising, because the vets who come over here and take care of our animals, just like our local vets, and when we go up to Cornell and take them to specialists and people who really know what they're doing, they are the same people that are working with the industry, big farms, small farms, where animals are numbered, where they serve a purpose, and their care is geared towards just trying to keep them productive, or to keep your investment growing in terms of like beef cows. We will have any male animal who comes through our door, we have them, just as an example, we have them totally anesthetized, pain meds, all sorts of goodies if when the males are going to be castrated. But standard farming practice for pigs, goats, cows, sheep is there is no anesthesia. There are no painkillers. You can look it up yourself how it's done. But that we pay our vets to come out here, spend the time waiting for, like 150-pound sheep to pass out, then to have their testicles removed, and then pain meds for days. I mean, that's just not how it's done typically. These same people who are given this level of care to our animals are the same people who are crushing scrotums with different horrifying medieval-looking equipment, and, tail docking, ear notching, castrating, and other horrible forms of torture that they do on other animals regularly. Because to see them in a different light, to see them as an animal who might need to be relieved of their pain during one of these procedures, they're working with farmers who are paying the bills, and they don't allow for such things, such pleasantries. It's like standard practice. When I was at Cornell working with Fawn and seeing the vet up there, they had a dairy cow who was there, and she was in labor. And I mean, really, like, stuff was dripping, like she was going into labor. And I asked one of the vet students, what was going on and when was she due? And then my heart just kind of sank, and I said, is she going to get to stay with her baby? And the vet tech student looked at me and kind of shook her head, and she said, no, we've got to take her right away. And later on that day, I went back through, because I left for a while while Fawn was getting x-rays and some other things, and found out that the baby was actually stillborn. of that cow. It was a really complicated birth. That's why she was there, and the baby didn't make it. And in a way, I felt this relief because this baby wouldn't have had to have been torn from her mother, and then, put into a stall where she would live in isolation and be, later on replace her mother on the dairy production line. When she would be less than 2 years of age, she would be forcibly impregnated. She would have her baby torn from her heartbreaking bellows 9 months later and go through the same process over and over again, only to be turned into hamburger when they're about 4 or 5 years old, even though they could live to 20 or 25. So, I actually felt this sense of relief. But going back to, these vets, it's like it feels like we're having to shake hands with the devil sometimes, because these are the same vets who do deplorable things to animals because they're working, their clients are industry people, where these animals are just mere commodities. And so it's depressing. It's depressing to go to Cornell. And even though it's a place where, vet students fall in love with our animals, when Fawn came home from there the first time, they'd actually written on her cast, "We love Fawn." But, it's the surgeons, it's the actual doctors who end up kind of hardening these students up a bit. And they see the realities that these animals are to be treated in a different way. And it just doesn't even make any sense to me. But, then again, I'm a judger.
It makes me wonder how much, like, the animal agriculture industries fund veterinary schools, so they teach them those practices and teach them that way to revolve around profit instead of necessarily around actual care.
Yeah, well, totally. One of their facilities, it's a barn that I think stores a lot of the feed and hay for the animals who are there, is like built by Dean Foods. You can see marketing and corporate influence all over the place there. They've got their Cornell monthly magazine, and it's horrifying too. It's like people and the environment and animals working together, and just the slant, the weirdness, how it's just so invisible, how their murder is so easily glossed over. It's just strange. I'll just never get used to it. But, for us who see this as a hugely important issue, as the social justice movement of our times, it's one of the greatest wrongs of all time, and evolving to understand that if we can live happy and healthy lives without causing harm to others, well, shouldn't we live that way? And it sometimes feels like other people are just living in a cave, not wanting to come out at all. But it's sort of like, for us, it's the burden of knowing, it's the burden of knowing, it's the burden of caring. And I'm hyper aware of it all the time. I live and breathe talking about animal rights and trying to be a voice for the voiceless, and running this organization and keeping funded, and all the things that go into running a nonprofit organization with a purpose, with a cause that really only appeals to a small number of people, but fortunately a growing number of people, because lots of people say they care about animals, but they don't mean 99% of the animals who we share this country with, for example. And those are farm animals. People say they love animals, but they really only mean maybe wild animals and cats and dogs. But it's a pretty schizophrenic notion to say you love farm animals and then you eat them. There's a lot that's wrong with that. So, any experience of going to Cornell, and I do my best to just focus on the animals who we have there, but it's so hard not to walk by the other animals who, who've got these huge numbers punched into their ears, or the cow who's always there in her own stall who has a giant hole in her side because she's a rumen donor cow. And she'll live a life of isolation with people, sucking up bile, or what is it called? It's like their rumen juice inside of one of their stomachs, and they're like in this prison where they're just used sorry about that, where they're just used for the purposes of helping other cows with rumen problems. It's so depressing to go there. But again, everything that we do, it's like to come back here and at the Woodstock Farm Sanctuary, we're in a bubble here where everything feels right in the world, where, the animals are someone's and not something's, and where we're working towards an end goal of total liberation for animals. That's not something that we should feel shy about saying either,
So what's your origin story? How did you get into doing what you do and also caring for animals?
Well, it's a long story. I actually have a book that's out called The Lucky Ones, My Passionate Fight for Farm Animals. And it is my whole story and my path and how I came to found a sanctuary. But I will keep it brief. Here's the abridged version. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, in a Southern Baptist household. I ate everything that crawled and swam and flew and never thought about who was on my plate, or the fact may even made the connection that it was an animal, and I was a child of the 70s. Never met a vegetarian until I was in college. But basically, when I was 10 years old, I got cancer and lost my lower right leg to a big malignant bone tumor. And I underwent over 2 years of chemotherapy. I was a really sick kid, missed a lot of school, came from a single parent. Well, my parents got divorced when I was like 2 years old, and I don't know my dad at all. So my mom worked, and she worked the night shift as a nurse. And I was never allowed, we lived with my grandparents, and I was never allowed to have my own pet. I don't like calling them pets anymore. They're animal companions. And I was finally allowed, when you can sort of play the cancer card, like, I just had my leg cut off. Maybe I can have a kitty now. So I played that card and was able to adopt a kitten. And that cat was her name was Boogie. It was originally Booger because I was a really gross kid. And she was the catalyst for the way I began viewing animals. And again, growing up in sort of a religious household, and knowing that there was, being told that there was a heaven and a hell and that humans have souls. Well, when, you would ask in church, well, what about the animals? Don't they have souls? No, we're made in God's form and only humans have souls. And then I would ask my grandmother, well, it doesn't make any sense because my cat, Boogie, she has a personality and she has different emotions, and I can tell when she's happy and when she's sad, and she doesn't act like several years later, my sister was adopted a cat. And so Boogie doesn't act like Bella. And so why is it that they're seen or treated any different? And then when I was told, still young, is that, well, the animals you love, you'll see in heaven. Mind you, I'm agnostic now. I'm a spiritual person, but definitely don't belong to any organized religion. But it just didn't make any sense for me. So even as a little redneck, 10-year-old, struggling with cancer, mixed up, messed up kid who was just angry at the world, this thing became very clear to me at a young age. But it wasn't until I went to University of Louisville and I picked up some literature from PETA, and I read about how how animals who are used for entertainment in labs, and ultimately the animals who we eat, how they're all treated, what their lives are like, why zoos are bad, again, why circuses are bad. So my eyes were open my freshman year of college. And I ended up moving to Chicago, going to film school in Chicago. But I became vegetarian at 18 and started, was a PETA member and would go to protests. Then I moved to Chicago 3 years later and studying film, met a woman. I was waiting tables at a really old vegetarian restaurant called the Chicago Diner in Chicago. And this was like in 1992 or 93. And I met a woman from PETA. And I was so starstruck. It's like, oh, my God, because I'd only, in terms of animal rights organizations, PETA was all I knew about back then. And I ended up doing, because I was a, film student, I knew how to work video cameras. I ended up documenting this big fur protest that went down in Chicago. And this woman who I was meeting was an organizer for it. And she and I kind of hit it off. I videotaped this whole thing. I told her I wanted to be more involved. That led to doing some undercover animal rights things for PETA, some successful and some not. But then I started to get work. I graduated from college and needed to make a living. So I was working on commercials and independent films and waiting tables on the side and didn't really have much time for anything and would help out when I could. But I ended up, so almost 10 years go by. I'm still an animal activist and then I attend protests and I'm a vegetarian and, and I still care about all the issues and talk to people about the issues. But I started getting, as I was crawling up the ladder in terms of working in production on television and on films, starting out as a lowly production assistant and working my way up to producing and directing segments on television, and then ultimately producing and directing like a show for Discovery Channel. And I'd worked for the filmmaker Errol Morris, and I worked on the show Frontline, and because by that time I moved to Boston. So I was all over the place and was having this exciting career. After 9/11, kind of got a little disenchanted with it all. All the arts funding was being pulled for all the cool documentaries that were in development. And I had learned about Farm Sanctuary and started getting their literature and really started taking a look at, wow, in terms of animal suffering across the board, no one suffers worse than farm animals. If you're going to spend your life or give your passion to helping animals, farmed animals are they have the greatest need, and they suffer, and just in terms of numbers, many, many more times than other animals who are used again in entertainment or in laboratories or whatever. So I wanted to go check out Farm Sanctuary, and the weekend that I went there, drove from Boston with my now husband out to Watkins Glen, New York, and visited Farm Sanctuary. It just changed my life. I learned so much in a weekend that I decided, okay, well, I at least want to become more active in farm animal advocacy, and I'm not going to leave my career just yet. I would be interested in adopting some farm animals who needed help, and to help a sanctuary out and to do that. But so I ended up going to what they call their annual animal care conference. And that's a weekend long crash course where you learn everything, all the ins and outs of starting a sanctuary. Most people run screaming. I decided I didn't just want to adopt animals. I wanted this to be my life. And at that weekend, I had told Gene Bauer that I used to do this, I had done some undercover video work for PETA back in the early 90s, and told him some of my successes and showed him some of the video. And then literally 3 weeks later, he sends me out to Texas, where with undercover camera equipment and a little purse with like a little tripod mount and something I had done before in the 90s. And still, mind you, this is back in 2000, 3 when I met Jean and visited Farm Sanctuary. And technology still wasn't what it was today, little cameras and things like that. But I went to Texas by myself for a week documenting downed animals at the stockyards. So it's all the quote unquote livestock, animals being born there, animals who are so disabled and, you know, like eyes melting down their face from cancer, animals with broken hips, you know, the downed animals who at the end of the day, they haul onto the trucks to take them to slaughter in all sorts of just unimaginable ways. What I saw there in the first day was a whole truckload of veal calves being unloaded from just one local dairy operation. And this is before I had become a vegan. And in that moment, I got it. That was it. Saw these little babies, some still wet from birth fluids with umbilical cords hanging, sick, confused, torn from their mothers, shivering, desperately, you know, these guys just yanking on their tails and pulling them by their ears and kind of kicking them with their feet to get them and their wobbly legs to walk to a pen off the truck. It's like just seeing the worst side of humanity. But so what I saw that week, in a nutshell, turned me vegan, made me realize that I didn't give a shit about film and television anymore, that this was a thing. How could you see this and not want to dedicate your life to it? And from that weekend on, I mean, basically, I was so scarred by what I saw in the course of 1 week that I've not for a moment, other than with really crazy animal activists who are really divisive and point fingers at one another and try to make this already fragmented movement even more broken because of terrible infighting. That was a long one. But basically, you know, this is it for me, that this exists right now, that we're having this conversation, that we just shared a giggle, you know, and then immediately, how dare I laugh or do anything fun when I think about the amount of suffering that's happening right now. And, you know, and this is what my everyday is like too. I'm not like a totally horrible, depressed person to be around, but the injustice, the suffering it overwhelms me. And it's ever present for me. And it's what keeps me going. And, you know, and that's why starting a sanctuary and realizing the power that just introducing these animals to people, the power that has. To me, you know, I knew after that week I was going to dedicate my life to doing something about what we're doing to farm animals and how invisible it is and how factory farms, you know, lack even the most basic transparency, and how messed up our indoctrination is from a very early age. And why is it that we're a society of people who don't think critically? And why do we categorize animals between, you know, from those we love and those we eat? And none of it makes sense. And people don't ask, and they're all walking around and looking at their freaking phones and living their sometimes very vapid, materialistic, selfish lives. And, you know, not to be, whoops, my judgment muscle was just getting a real workout there. But, you know, I mean, this, for me and for a growing number of people, this has to happen. It's with the same passion and rage and motivation that, you know, the people, the activists involved in the civil rights movement had. I mean, it's an injustice. And we have to start evolving. And I'm just one of many of people who I see as like an agent of change. This is what my life is all about. And for a number of people who work here at the sanctuary or are seriously involved in the sanctuary, we're just trying to make vegans.
So that weekend up in Texas, before you had that weekend, you were exposed to animal issues for it seems like a pretty long time. You're already vegetarian. So what did you think of animal rights activists and vegans in general up until that point? Were you kind of just like, oh, they're just too radical?
It wasn't like something I thought about a lot. I really thought that I was living a pretty righteous life just by being vegetarian. It's amazing how easy it is not to see the things you don't want to see. And maybe I was that, although I wasn't consciously that when it came to the amount of suffering in the dairy and egg industry. And what I tell people now, a big part of my tours is I talk about how I didn't know this. And in fact, there's more suffering in every glass of milk and piece of cheese and an egg sandwich, or scrambled egg or baked good with an egg than there is even in eating a chicken breast or piece of steak. There's more suffering, longer term, more emotional and physical suffering for the animals who are used for milk and for eggs. And I didn't know that back then. And my one experience with a vegan was when I worked at the vegetarian Chicago Diner. Their slogan is meat free since '83, and they're still around and kicking, and they're great folks. Although they should be a totally vegan restaurant, and they're not. They're just vegetarian. But that was when I remember, and this was, mind you, I'm in college, and I'm a transplant from Louisville, Kentucky into Chicago. And there was this woman who worked at the Chicago Diner, and I would wish I remember her last name, and I wish I could track her down. But her name was Joan, and she smelled like patchouli, and she listened to Jim Mitchell, and she never wore makeup, and she had hair in all the places that women shouldn't have hair. For me, and my thinking at the time, she was the only vegan that I knew. And I chalked it up with like a purist lifestyle thing, never thinking it was like really radical, kind of associating it with just kind of a scene I didn't fully understand, didn't want to fully understand, didn't understand that it was for the animals, truly. And I wish that she would have explained to me, like sat me down. I wish somebody would have sat me down and said, here are the reasons people go vegan. I just wasn't exposed to it. And I was busy. I was in school. I was working and, just doing what I could to keep my head above water. And I just, now I take every opportunity. And that's why I, even though I am so busy and, yes, I'm the founder, but it doesn't make me, and we've got a staff of about 12 now in total, but I'm still out there doing tours on the weekends because I got so much to tell people, because I so wish somebody would have told me back then. And I didn't have this idea of what a vegan was, and I was so far off track. So
how many visitors or volunteers that come into the sanctuary do you kind of see yourself as? Like, maybe they're coming in, maybe they're vegetarian, maybe they're not, they're kind of like, I just love animals and not really knowing. Is that like super common, or do you mostly
Very, very common. We hear a lot. Like, one of the biggest things because I think they're already looking further into thinking more about animal rights, are the people who come who are vegetarian. And I can't tell you how many vegetarians leave here vegan, because they already care. If they're vegetarian for ethical reasons, they already care, but they just didn't know. But at the same time, there's so many people who come and they love animals and, I've always wanted to hug a pig. But you see these light bulbs going off when I take groups around and take people in with the animals, and they meet the cows and they meet the ducks and they meet the scrawny egg-laying chickens who came from battery cages, and right next to them are the Big Bertha broiler chickens who are, bred specifically for massive breasts and are killed at 45 days of age. Because we have these industry animals, we do have some like backyard type chickens. We don't have potbelly pigs and we don't have horses. We really focus on animals who are used for food and for fiber, in terms of sheep. But lamb meat, of course, exists. But with ducks, the demand for down is actually surpassing the demand for duck meat. So it's good to kind of talk about both. But people have no idea. They just think that they put all chickens in the same category. They don't even understand that eggs aren't typically fertilized unless there's a male. They don't understand how it all works. And they don't understand that there is no just one chicken that we use anymore in this day and age for meat and for eggs. It's like two different types of chickens whose bodies, whose genes have been so distorted and manipulated by us so that they could be exploited to the maximum. With the little 4-pound egg-laying white chickens, the little white leghorns who are all debeaked, and they're tiny, but yet their bodies, they lay like 300 eggs a year. And then right over in the next yard are these birds who we have to severely limit their food, give them lots of room to run around, not have as many, because they can hurt themselves, but the birds who are raised for meat, and looking at the difference between them, looking at how they're all white because, the color has been bred out of them. So there's no unsightly, dark feather follicles, which might remind people that they were once a living animal. Having the opportunity, we also have actual battery cages, a row of battery cages from a factory farm. This is where the magic happens, truly, because people, whether or not they were a vegetarian or they came here because they thought they loved animals or they were just kind of interested, these realities are what really blows people's minds. And they start understanding vegan almost right off the bat, because when we do our tours, which, by the way, we get thousands of people through here when we're open to the public for tours. And if you want to go in with the animals, you have to go on a tour. So that's how we get them. You want to come pet the pig? You are going to listen to my truth. So, it's just an amazing opportunity, but it really, we know because of phone calls and letters and emails and Facebook posts and donations with little notes, we are really making a difference. There's no doubt in my mind. We would have never just had a sanctuary just to help animals in need. To me, if you're going to have a farm animal sanctuary, you're missing such an amazing opportunity to, work in tandem with those animals in terms of them being ambassadors for the cause and helping many, many, many more animals in the process just through your voice, through them being their precious selves, and taking those opportunities to make some really important connections for people, and hoping that people find something in their heart that they didn't even know was missing. And oftentimes they do. So that's the fabulousness of all of it.
So when you first started the sanctuary, did you ever have a moment where you sat back and go, oh shit, I have no idea what I'm doing?
I think I skipped out in large part. After I did the undercover work for Farm Sanctuary, I went right after I did that undercover work, did the biggest job of my whole career in Boston. That was my big Discovery Channel hour-long documentary about the concept of building a transatlantic tunnel. I didn't get to pick the subject matter. It was actually given to me. But anyway, it was a big job. But that was it. I was done. That was it for me. I'd worked in film and television for over a decade, scratched and clawed my way up, was a bigger fish in a smaller pond in Louisville, Kentucky, working in production, a smaller fish in a bigger pond in Chicago, and then a completely different fish in a completely different pond in Boston, where I switched and worked completely over to mostly documentary and public television style stuff, documentaries mostly. But it doesn't serve my purpose. And, my husband actually is an award-winning film editor, and we hope that one day we'll be able to make a film about all this. But boy, is that difficult when there's not even enough hours in the day to do what we need to do to keep it all going. We've got almost 300 animals, and some big news that we're finally starting to tell people and announce is that we're picking up the whole sanctuary and moving. The whole sanctuary and moving. We're 23 acres, and we purchased a property that is 150 acres. That's only 90 minutes from New York City, and that was an existing camp and retreat. So not only is it going to be a large farm animal sanctuary, but you can come and do a retreat there. You can have, come on a compassionate kids camp or youth activist boot camps, adult activist boot camps, vegan cooking classes, we're so many lectures, our own Veg Fest, our own animal rights conference. I mean, we're going to be able to do so much. It currently sleeps about 140 people with a massive commercial kitchen and a massive dining hall, a big old permaculture garden. I mean, it's crazy. It's a beautiful creek that runs through. It's more like a small river. Creek, sometimes when you think about creek, some people have the idea of like a little babbling, tiny little thing. This is a beautiful, you can take a canoe on it, but it's called a creek that goes through the property. We are going to be able to do so much. And it's so exciting because not only are we going to be able to triple the size for our capacity to help individual farm animals in need, but what we're going to be able to do in terms of outreach and reaching more people and getting people there and, really trying to have immersion weekends where people can come and they can volunteer and they eat delicious vegan food and they spend time with the animals and, just this all-encompassing experience. So there's lots going on. It's right now that we've made the announcement at 2 benefits in the past couple of months, but our supporters they should be receiving the big announcement in the mail in the next 2 weeks. And so this is right on the cusp of making the announcement to everybody. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to start moving animals over there in May. We're actually not going to be open at this location any longer. The next time we will be open to the public will be at the new location in June. And people should watch our website and sign up for our e-newsletter to learn all about it. We also are going to have lots of internship opportunities. People who might be interested in learning about animal care, or we need people for on the administrative side, development, social media. We also want people who are interested in just working on cool projects, carpentry, fixing up an old shed to make into a chicken coop, because there's a couple of old sheds there that need help, putting up fencing, making nest boxes. So, people who are interested in doing some carpentry and construction, artist in residence. We want to do cool murals all over the sides of the barns and have animal-friendly sculptures. We just made big old ideas is what's happening here. Big ideas.
Well, you got me excited because while I don't love necessarily hugging a pig, I do love woodworking. So, But another thing that you mentioned is something me and my wife have been looking into for our daughter is, kids camps and summers camps. My daughter's almost 9 and we're looking at, different places she can go. And there's not a whole bunch of them in the United States, and most of them don't start till they're quite a bit older. So
yeah, you may be talking about the Yay Camp, which is Youth Empowered Action Camp, and we are working with them already, and they're holding a Yay Camp at our new location this summer. And for the first time ever, it's always been a vegan camp, but the kids would be, they were there if they're interested in any kind of social justice cause, whether it be marriage equality or racial issues or, whatever. They're there. Animal rights is always one of those categories. And so for that reason, it's always a vegan camp. But it doesn't just focus on animal rights. But for the first time ever, They're doing that camp at our new location, as well as an animal rights specific camp for youth as well. So we are so excited, and so are they. Nora Kramer is the wonderful lady who runs that organization. And we just saw each other in LA, and we had many high fives because we're both so excited about it.
Well, that's really, really super exciting because we were looking at that. I think you have to be 12 is the age they start. So we're already planning, for when my daughter turns 12 to start making that an annual tradition.
Yeah, well, we're hoping somebody comes in. I mean, there's a couple of groups who do like day camps, but we would love to have camps for kids who are younger, get them started young, and definitely something for, college age kids as well. When you're fighting those, our enculturated habits and beliefs, that's where we want to get them. And also, our new location is close to 2 universities, which is great because we don't have anything like that around here in the town of Woodstock with a bunch of old hippies and Republicans. Oh my God, did I just say that out loud? I don't even know what those are. This idea of what Woodstock is all about, sort of some peace, love, and progressiveness. Really, this town is totally run by people who were here long before the concert. And by the way, the concert didn't even happen in this town. It happened like an hour away from here in Bethel Woods. So, as many folks say, Woodstock is really a state of mind. So even though we're going to be living in a town called High Falls, we're keeping the name Woodstock Farm Sanctuary, because it truly is a state of mind for what the concert was supposed to be about. It doesn't, my husband likes to say Woodstock is not a municipality.
Well, how can people, get in contact with you, follow your work, and,
get involved?
Yeah.
Well, they can go to our website, which is woodstocksanctuary.org. And there's all sorts of information there about volunteering and visiting, but we have not yet, and we're getting ready to. Next week is the week where we're going to be making the big announcement about the move. So there's going to be lots of new information coming up, but basically just writing to us. If they heard this podcast, they can refer to it and tell us what they're interested in doing, whether it be animal caregiving or, fundraising, development, social media, graphics, design work, you name it, we need it. Construction, carpentry, and we'll be able to put people up at the new place for people who are willing to give us, maybe a minimum of a month. We'll be able to provide housing, and it'll be really groovy, sort of communal living. And we need help right now because this is a huge undertaking. We have a very active Facebook and Twitter, so they can go onto our Facebook page. We're always posting super groovy stuff. Like today, you can watch a super sweet video of Ashton the sheep giving me the hoof like a dog gives the paw over and over again because I stopped petting him, and it's hilarious. And all the while, Bert the goat is rubbing so hard on my head because I'm down on the ground, and he does that every time I'm down on the ground, that he's knocking my hat off, and it's just a ridiculous scene of just love. So you got to check it out. So we're always posting great stuff on there.
Well, you're making me kind of want to go high five a sheep.
Oh, anytime. You guys are far. You're out there. What sanctuary? Now, you have best friends out there, but that's dogs, cats, and...
Yeah, and that's kind of in Kanab. There's a local chapter here in Salt Lake, which is a little bit smaller, more shelter-like. Mm-hmm. And then there's Ching Farm Animal Sanctuary.
Oh, right, Ching. Yes, I went out there. I actually visited her years ago when I visited Best Friends. I completely forgot she was in Utah, of course.
And then a friend just moved from Seattle, Ducks and Clucks Sanctuary.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So that's chickens and ducks. I take chickens and ducks. Okay.
And currently there's a goose there, but yeah.
And goose are very judgmental, by the way. They're always judging me.
They are.
they're so clever, and they can either be, just like people, they can be really mean and nasty, or they can be so friendly and curious and in your business and sweet and nibbly, or they could also take off half your face if they wanted to.
Yeah. They scare the hell out of me.
I love them. They're a giant honking bird.
Yeah, they sound like a little bike honk.
I know. We actually don't have any geese here right now. We have a wonderful goose adopter here in New York, and it's a beautiful inn and spa, and they take great care of the animals. But they've got this beautiful pond with big fountain, and the owner loves adopting geese and ducks. So we've had such great luck with finding them homes, because we do adopt out animals to loving homes who promise never to eat them. But not just that, we have a very strict criteria for animals to be adopted. And of course we do a site visit, and there's interviews and all kinds of stuff. So that's why many of our animals don't get adopted, because most people, it's not enough passion, space, responsibility, in a myriad of ways. It's a responsibility to have these animals. It means you go out of town and somebody always has to watch them, and cost a lot of money to feed them, and you need to have the money to take them to the vet as you would a cat or dog, that sort of thing. So,
well, this has been a lot of fun. We end every episode saying "fuck, shit, damn." Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Fuck, shit, damn.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We got to get our explicit rating in there somehow.
If I knew I could have dropped the F-bomb earlier on, I would have been doing so.
We can edit it in if you want to say it a couple times.
Oh, no. Too much work.
This week you heard
Start Shooting by Little People.
Right now you're listening to
The Outside by Elliot Lip.
iTunes. If you haven't rated and reviewed us yet, please just do it right this second. It really helps out the show. Plus, you can always, do a ghost subscription and ghost rating of someone you know. Just grab their phone, open up their podcast app, which all new iPhone OSs have, and just, hit the little button that says 5-star. I fucking love these guys.
I challenge all of you to find at least one person to subscribe.
Ooh, you have been challenged.
Especially you, Seth.
Challenge. He probably finds the most.
I know.
Yeah.
I just want to call him out again.
I'm super jealous of his mountain biking lately.
If you haven't already, you can also be our friend on social media. You can like us and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr, and Facebook. That's the other one. Go to whichsidepodcast.com. Click on the social tab. We often post things on there that we don't talk about on the show.
Can you say fuck, shit, damn in a burp?
Damn.
I can't follow that up.
Marty's like, that's awful.
We need a social media intern to join our team. If interested in becoming activist famous or a level 5 vegan, hit us up on social media. Which Side Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Which Side Media Collective, with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to whichsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck, shit, damn.